I think it's a good sign when the top comment from part 1 of a video is, yeah, but where's part 2? Hey, what's up, bookworms and constant readers? We are back again as I'm continuing my Ranking Stephen King series. This is going to be part 2, which is the years 1983 through 1989. One of my favorite stretches in the man's entire career. So I think this will be quite the fun episode to talk about. Like I kind of just joked about, part 1, we did the beginning of his career, 74 through 82. And like I said, I think the most comments I got was, hey, we need part 2 ASAP. So I actually planned on spacing these out a little bit further because I kind of wanted to kind of go along with my Into the Multiverse read, but got to give the people what they want, right? So I think I can go up, I think one more part after this up until where I've done my Into the Multiverse rereading. And so we'll be doing the 2 and 3 here rather soon. But real quick, just in case you missed part 1 and you want to catch that, obviously you can watch part 1 on the channel, but if you want to know more about it, I'm going to give you a brief little rundown of what the categories mean. Obviously, Ka and then everything else is going to be the cream of the crop, which rises to the top. That's the best of the best, S tier, if you will. My Heart Burns There Too is really, really great, but not quite on the level with the ones up there with Ka and then everything else. You've Got the Shine is something I think is really, really great, but not quite something that I'm going to be like, you must drop everything and read it right now. Dirty Birdie is going to be something I'd be like, you know what, I think it's worth your time, but it's nothing I would ever reread. And then Shitters, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. That's ones I'm going to think. If it wasn't Stephen King writing it, I probably wouldn't be reading it again. So there we go, guys. That is the category. So we're going to kind of dive in here. Now, first, I got a little quick disclaimer. In the last video, I had a lot of comments about where's different seasons, where is Night Shift, things like that. Look, guys, I am not going to be doing short stories in this. This is just novels. However, after some consideration, I am going to put the novella collections on there because you know what? I'm putting the Bachman books on here, and a lot of those are even shorter than some of his novellas in different seasons and 4 Past Midnight, things like that. So I'm going to do that, but the short stories, I'm not going to do it because, guys, those are like 12, 13 pages, and I think it's kind of unfair to put a lot of those short stories, even in a collection, up against some of these heavy hitters here. Now, if I'm done with this completely and you guys still want me to put the short story collections in there, I'll go ahead and do that. But I am going to be doing the novella collection. So this technically is going to be the end of 1982 through 1989 because I am going to put different seasons on here. And we're going to begin with that one, guys. Different seasons. Now, this is a spectacular book. You got to think you've got some big, big hitters here. You got The Body, which is known as Stand By Me to a lot of people. You've got Shawshank Redemption. Obviously, that's quite the big one. At Pupil, a story that I think is very, very relevant for the time because people throw around a term in that book rather loosely now. And I'm like, I don't think people who went through that appreciate that term being thrown around because someone has a different opinion than you. And then The Breathing Method, a story I feel like it's lost because of the greatness of those other 3 stories, but I think is very, very good. In fact, I said in my review of The Breathing Method, I feel like that was almost a precursor for what became Odetta in The Dark Tower. So there are lots of things to unpack there, but this is just, again, you got to talk about just Shawshank and The Body alone, I think, are 2 of his greatest stories ever. This isn't really a horror novel. In At Pupil, they talk about a lot of horrific things. Obviously, you're talking about the Holocaust, but there's not very many things about it that I can find wrong. So this is going to be right at the top, guys, of My Heart Burns Return. Not quite before The Shining, because The Shining is just an all-time classic. I'm going to put it between The Shining and The Dead Zone if it'll let me. It's really not wanting to let me do that there. There we go. So it went from not being on the list, guys, to right up there towards the top of My Heart Burns There Too. So yeah, I think that's always everybody always asks me, where should I start with Stephen King, Mike? I tell them, if you don't want horror, and if you're one of those people who thinks that Stephen King can't write, I definitely think you'll into different seasons and you'll see the man was quite an excellent writer, as he really, really does write some things. They're just absolutely beautiful. Some of the most beautiful passages that he's ever written are in that collection there. All right, so 1983, guys. we're going to start with Christine. And no, it's not going to be a shitter, even though that's where I pull that from. But Christine's a story I think has kind of gotten a bad reputation over time. I think even King has kind of just been like, whatever with it. He even says a few times that he's not sure if the car is possessed, if it's got a ghost in it. He just kind of has left that up to your interpretation. I think when John Carpenter adapted it, he even told him, I'm not really sure, just kind of do what you want to do with it. So that's during that stretch where I think he was quite intoxicated a lot, and he wasn't quite sure with some things, but obviously he had great ideas. I think the thing that really throws people off on Christine is half of it is third person and half of it is first person, which gets really confused. A really interesting choice to make that in the middle of a novel, everything up until where the main character gets injured, and then it's all from his point of view. And it's an interesting choice. It's an interesting choice for sure. But it has a lot of things I really enjoy about it. Coming of age, bullying obviously is a big thing in there. And King's, you can tell he did not like greasers very much when he was growing up. That was basically the bullies in the 50s and 60s, in case you guys are not aware. You haven't watched Grease before. It's a story I think anyone who's ever been kind of bullied in high school, as you know, I think junior high is pretty much a terrible time for just about everyone. And of course, especially my generation and before, our worlds revolved around those four wheels and an engine. We loved the idea of restoring a classic car. And the idea of it can kind of just consume your life when you undergo a project like that. And that's kind of what happens to Arnie in this story. So while I don't think it's one of his best, obviously because of some of the writing choices, I'm going to put it up here around Cujo-ish kind of area. Probably not above Cujo, but right here, because I do think it does have a lot of the horrific elements that he became really famous for. I mean, the idea of not being able to exactly outrun a killer car, right? So lots of things to kind of explore with that one, but I do think the shift in narrative style in the middle of the book it probably does hurt it just a little bit. Next up, guys, we got to move along to one of my Halloween favorites here. This is Cycle of the Werewolf, and I say one of my Halloween favorites because I always read it around Halloween time when I was younger. Now, I always tell everybody that my gateway to Stephen King was it. I had actually kind of somewhat read Cycle of the Werewolf when I was a kid, because there was that movie, The Silver Bullet, and a friend of mine had that really cool comic collection of Cycle of the Werewolf. It had those really amazing drawings and stuff. So I wouldn't say I actually just like full on read it, but I kind of breezed through it a little bit. But this book I think is really cool because it does the idea of going through each chapter is a month on the calendar. Obviously, the way you're going through the cycles of the moon. Really neat idea. This is nothing, again, groundbreaking. It's very short. You can read it in one sitting. When I did my reread, I did it in one sitting. But I think it's one of those, it's kind of like if you got a young reader that's interested in getting into Stephen King, it's a good place for them to start, I think. You're okay with them seeing a little bit of violence, maybe a little bit of sexual content. Nothing graphic, but there is a little bit of sexual content in there. I think this is a really good place for them to start if you're ready for them to get into Stephen King and a little bit of those horror elements. So while it is kind of, like I said, kind of YA-ish, I think it still has the King stuff that we know and love. So I'm going to kind of put it right around here. You've got the shine. It's not quite on that lower bit here, but it's something I recommend for sure. But it's never anything I'm going to be like, I'm going to reread a Stephen King story. Am I reaching for that one? Probably not, unless I am just kind of wanting to flip through those amazing illustrations. So now we get into one of the classics. I think anyone who knows anything about Stephen King, they think Pet Sematary, right? It's got to be one of his most famous books. Even casuals have heard the story. Amazing stories about Pet Sematary, and that it's the only story that ever scared Stephen King so much that he put it in a drawer for 3 years. And he decided he owed the publisher a book, and he gave him that, and it ended up being huge for him. And I think it's because it's so many he writes so many things from real life experiences, obviously saving his kid from actually getting run down the street. And unfortunately, that does not happen in the book that way. So I think that those kind of things, the idea of his daughter, coming to terms with death when her cat dies, I think that's a really touching story. And it's one of those kind of things that, your childhood's over the moment you're going to die kind of thing. So it deals with that. But the things with that book, man, Pet Sematary with me, reading it as a teenager, yeah, it was scary because you had things coming from the dead. It was very scary content. Reading it as an adult with kids, absolutely scary for a different reason. And this book is the absolute best I have ever seen. It's someone dealing with grief, major grief. And what's more grief-stricken than losing a child, right? I mean, I think as a parent, that's our greatest fear, is losing a child. I mean, my oldest about to turn 10. I'm still like freaked out when he's outside playing in the street with his friends, So, and I think that might have a big thing to do with it. But Pet Sematary, this is one of the best ever. Has one of the scariest subject matter ever. In more ways than one. I mean, you want to talk about Zelda being one of the scariest things I've ever read. Yeah, it's chilling, guys. This is one that is as freaky as advertised. And again, I get that question, where should I start with Stephen King? And I say, you want the hell scared out of you? I think Pet Sematary is a great place to start, guys. This is all the way up there, Caw and everything else. I got this right behind the stand because this book is absolutely amazing. I loved it every bit as much on a reread, and it scared me for very different reasons than it did as a teenager. So I just say, make sure you're in the right frame of mind when you read the story. Don't read it when you're already like in a bout of depression or something, because it will not help. And I think that is a great compliment to a really, really well written and crafted story for sure. Then we do like the complete opposite, guys, and we're going to go full young adult now. And this is Eyes of the Dragon. This is one I think is very, very controversial because, believe it or not, people don't know, this is the book that inspired King to write Misery because of the reaction to it. Now, if you don't know, Eyes of the Dragon is just a fantasy story written for his daughter at the time. So it was the first non-horror, non-adult fiction that he wrote, and the fans freaked out about it. And apparently a lot of people were like, stay in your lane, you're a horror writer, it's all you'll ever be, quit writing this, children's stuff. So much so that, like I said, it encouraged him to come up with this idea of writing Misery. So there's that. I read it for the first time, guys, 2020, I think. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think knowing that going in, obviously, that it was written for, his daughter, that helped me quite a bit. The reason I didn't read it, and that's going down a long rabbit hole, guys, I did when I first did my, How I Became a Constant Reader video a while back, about, after I finished Dark Tower, I was very, very upset with some things, and I said, I don't want to read any more Stephen King fantasy right now, so I skipped that and Talisman, which are the next two I'm going to talk about. So I read them for the first time recently. Eyes of the Dragon I liked a lot. I thought it was very, very charming, very much in a fairy tale kind of way, and what do you know? There are some Dark Tower crossover moments in there, so very, very cool stuff. I'm reading Insomnia now, and they're talking about the dim, and it's things like that. Obviously, you've got... lots of Dark Tower characters. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to say lots, but there are some crossover there that I think you guys will know. I don't want to really get too spoilery with this here, but Tower Junkies will find plenty to like there, even if it is obviously written for a younger audience. It's almost like a medieval Shawshank Redemption because it does have to do with a prison break. So it's a very interesting tale, I think, and I enjoyed it a lot. And again, if you're the young reader in the house that's interested, Mom, Dad, why do you like Stephen King so much? Definitely the perfect gateway for them would be this, because they get used to his writing style without all that stuff us parents don't want our kids to know about, right? So nothing I'm going to call spectacular, like I said, obviously being the age range that I am, but if I had read this as a preteen or something, I probably would have been way, way, way higher on it, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. So I'm going to put it right behind Firestarter right here. So it's definitely something I wouldn't even mind revisiting, because again, like I said, charming is definitely the word that I would pick for it. Now, the Talisman. That review I did for Talisman has not went over well, because I think the Talisman is one of those, if you read it when you were younger, I think you'll like it quite a bit. You'll relate with the protagonist a lot more. My problem with this book, and I think I've had this problem anytime Stephen King does a joint effort with another author, because I didn't like Sleeping Beauties, and obviously I didn't like this. I haven't even read the Gwendy ones yet because of this. I haven't read Gwendy yet. I haven't read Black House yet. And my thing is, I think it's just in here knowing that this was a team effort with him and Peter Straub, that anything I didn't like, I was blaming on Straub, and everything I liked, I was giving credit to King. And that's unfair. That's definitely unfair. My problem is that Richard has got to be the most annoying character in the entire multiverse. It's like going on vacation with an ambulance. He's just the whole time. That guy is just whining to a point to where I wanted the character to die, and I never want the children characters to die in Stephen King books. So it didn't click for me the way that it did for everyone else. I just wanted it to be a Dark Tower book, and it wasn't very clearly. I don't know. There was just something about it I didn't quite care for. The stuff with Jack, I liked a lot. Everything else, I wasn't really wild about. I usually like the slice of life stuff that Stephen King does, but there's a stretch where like Jack's just like working at a bar, under the counter for like 3 or 4 chapters, and I'm like, what am I reading right now? But it's just when I never really could get into that flow. The ending was great and things like that, so I liked where it was going enough to be like, okay, I'm going to read Black House when it does come up on my Into the Multiverse schedule. But yeah, it's just one that I don't know. Everybody loves it so much, and they all tell me they read it when they were like 12 or 13, and it just makes me wonder if it's one of those things you got to read when you're younger. So it wasn't really quite for me. And I know this is just going to get people flipping tables. And if you've got to leave now, I get it, guys. I'm putting it right here at the front of Dirty Birdie because it's nothing I don't feel like I'll ever read again. And yeah, it is what it is, guys. We all have some hot takes, even when it comes to, you know, my favorite author of all time. Now, my favorite author of all time writing, you know, openly now as Richard Bachman. Everyone knows that he is Richard Bachman at this point. And he goes ahead and puts out Thinner. And Thinner is a story I was just fascinated with when I read it. And I think it's because I love the friendship, oh God, with, I can't think of the main character's name right now, but Richie the Hammer. Him and Richie are just like such a cool friendship, man. I love that, just the idea of being friends with a mobster, you know, even if it is on like twisted terms, you know, obviously he gets him off the hook, you know, a lot as a kind of a dirty lawyer in many retrospects, and this is just like obviously karma coming back to get him. So it's one of those things where it's like, am I rooting for the bad guy right now? You know, obviously, hey, if I'm not rooting for the bad guy here, let me throw a mobster in here too, and just make this completely unlikable. But for some reason, you want to see him succeed, you know. So creepy idea. Anyone who's ever battled weight issues, I have, you know, the idea of, oh, all I want to do is lose weight, and then you say, well, what if you started losing weight and you couldn't stop it, you know? So a really, really scary thing. And I don't know. A lot of people always say this is like his worst one of his Bachman books, but I love it. I love it. And I think it really is just because that friendship between those two is just so strong. And the ending, oh man, what a gut punch on this ending. So yeah, I like it quite a bit, guys. I'm going to put it right behind the Gunslinger here on my heart. Burns there too. I think it's underrated. I liked it even more on a reread recently. So I hope you guys will maybe give it another try if you weren't nuts about it the first time around. Okay, if you've watched this channel at all before, guys, you know what my favorite Stephen King book of all time is. And that is Stephen King's It. This was my gateway to Stephen King when I first saw that miniseries on ABC way back in the early 90s. And I just fell in love with that story. And I said, I want to know more because I feel like this is Stephen King. It's kind of creepy content, but it seems like every time something spooky is about to happen, the TV fades to black and it goes to commercial. So I was like, I want to know more about this. So being raised in a strict religious household, I was not allowed to read Stephen King. So I had to do this in secret, you know, only at night when my mother was asleep or my mother was gone. So it took me an entire summer at 15 years old to read it, and it was my gateway, and it was everything that I loved about the coming of age plus horror, you know. And when I did the reread of this, you know, the first time I read it, I was all about the kids, the adults, okay. This time I loved both parts because it gave me that nostalgia for being a kid and all of the real life struggles you have as an adult. So I think this is a story that's great to read as a teen, and it is even better to read a second time as an adult when we've got those real life problems, you know. It's just, I love the coming of age genre, guys, and this has 7 coming of age stories in it. And it's just amazing. I know everybody just wants to talk about that one scene, but you know what? 99.9% of this book is absolutely amazing in spite of that one scene. And maybe his best villain, I don't know. I think I might have actually ranked those on the channel somewhere. You can find that if you'd like to. But yeah, guys, this is untouchable. I've read it twice, and I'm sure I would read it again. I don't care how long it is. Some people say the book is a little too long. For me, it could have kept going. It could still be going today, and I would still be loving that adventure with the Losers Club. It is just such a fun journey and a horrifying journey as well. But just so many things about it that I could just talk about forever. That's why it's the only book on this channel I've reviewed 3 times, you guys. So one was before I really even had a BookTube channel. It was just kind of like, I was excited about the movie coming out. And then obviously I just did my regular review before the movie did come out, and then I did my actual Into the Multiverse version of it. So the story I think I could talk about for hours and hours and hours. So if you guys want to, you know, drop in the comments. We can talk about some It for sure. Now we're back on the tower, guys, back on the path of the beam. I talked about how I thought that the Gunslinger has become kind of underrated over time. A lot of people have said like, oh, you should skip it. And I'm like, how can you skip that? That's like skipping the prologue to a great, great story. However, withdrawing of the 3, I think, is where where the series really took shape to what it was going to be. And guys, there is no other fantasy story ever anything like Dark Tower. You can't accuse it of stealing anything, because the very beginning of this, he depowers his main character and puts it into like, oh, well, things just got real. And then you're just on this crazy journey with these new companions and just the most wild ideas I could have ever imagined. I couldn't have ever imagined anything like this, but I was hooked right away from the first chapter of Drawing of the Three. I knew that the Dark Tower was going to be one of my favorite things ever. And guys, that's why it's one of my top 5 fantasy series of all time. It all started with Drawing of the Three, and one of my favorite characters in the multiverse, Eddie Dean's debut in that series, guys. This is going right here. I love it. I think it's just fantastic. Top of my heart burns there too. Guys, if you haven't read The Tower, I always tell people that I read The Gunslinger. I'd really read at least the first 2 if you've got the time. Then decide, because the first book is a big giant question mark. Book 2 gives you more like what the hells, but it's more like hooks. What the hells? I got to keep going to find out what is happening here. So yeah, I just love it so much, and I love that quartet first being formed here. It's just so much fun, and then going back and rereading it, the nostalgia level's been off the scale, and it's just it's an even better story this go around, seeing the seeds that he was planting for that end very, very early in the series. So it's a lot of fun on a reread, guys. It really, really is. You know, it's not fun seeing what Paul goes through in Misery. Now, when I read Misery for the first time, it was kind of amazing to be reading these books finally. When the movies were first coming out, when I first discovered them, I burned through everything that was coming out until I got to the point to where I was like, okay, actually picking these up right when the movies were coming out, or right before the movies came out, things like that. And Misery, obviously, everyone's talking about that amazing performance by Kathy Bates, but I mean, it's really, guys, it's straight from the page. It is a very, very faithful adaptation. I've always said that I feel like Frank Darabont, Mike Flanagan, and obviously Rob Reiner just kind of get what makes Stephen King work, and this is no exception. I mean, this is why this is the only Stephen King movie to get real big Oscar consideration, because it's just such an amazing story, really. Like I said, the movie is great because the book is great, and it's very faithful to the book. So guys, this is one of the best, and again, just seeing how layered of a villain that he can make with no supernatural things at all is just a person. And I've always said what makes his book great is he says that the real monsters in his story is humans and what humans do to one another. And this is, the ultimate case of it, guys. Misery is just a thrill ride, and it goes right there. I think it's just phenomenal, and I enjoyed it even more on a reread. Like I said, a lot of these I'm enjoying so much more as an adult for different reasons I won't say with that book. Now we get to some of the questionable ones. So this, guys, was the book that was so crazy that I think it's when his wife finally said, okay, it's intervention time. You need to get off the crack. All I said in my review about this, guys, was he went too far with the tentacle stuff. There's lots of things that go too far in Tommyknockers. Lots of things. And look, I love King for his, off-the-wall thinking and just going completely out there. I was all about, when it came out, him writing a science fiction book. I thought that was a great idea. And I still think that there is a good book in there somewhere. It just kind of got lost in the lines of cocaine, I feel like they were printing in the book. So there's some really good things. I like the character study of Guard quite a bit. I really think that, it's a damaged character that he would become really, really good at writing damaged characters really, really well. And I love the idea of this buried spaceship making this town go crazy. I think that's a neat idea, and it's been spoofed a lot. It really made me think of Colorado Space by H.P. Lovecraft. So you can see the influences are all there, and the story ideas are great. The execution just misses quite a little bit. He talks a little too much about like women's periods and things like that I'm like, Steve, can you get on task here? So, there's just a little thing where you could tell he was really, really under the influence with this, and it did not need to be so long. So, guys, this is rough. I don't want to put it on shitters, guys, because, like I said, I did reread it, and the thing about this is, before I started this channel, guys, I was just doing a straight Stephen King reread, and I got all the way, I was just in succession, one after the other, and this is where I stopped. At Tommyknockers, like, I need a break here, but I gotta say, I'm gonna put it right around here. I think that's pretty fair honestly, for a book that, like I said, again, I know a lot of people do actually like it. A lot of the comments in that video are not friendly to me because they really, really do like the book. But yeah, again, lots of great ideas, but the execution is beyond poor, I think. So how about, for the last one here, his first book sober? First book post-recovery after going through rehab, and he's been sober since, so good for him. He got his life back on track there, and he kind of wrote The Dark Half, which you can tell is mostly a story talking about like his other side. A lot of people want to say it's about Stephen King and Richard Bachman. Obviously there's some in there, but I think this is more about a book about like him dealing with his dark half, honestly, his demons that he is battling, which were, drugs and alcohol. So I think it was perfectly timed the way it does. But it's a story I feel like a lot of people kind of detract from. Don't think it's really that good. I think it's quite good. It's just different. You could tell he was in a transition period. This was the beginning, I think, of the second arc of his career, where he was like, I'm going to get away from just straight horror, and I'm going to start to write some drama, some real life experiences, and get into like the, what makes families break, things like that. I mean, obviously he was very scared after this about losing his family because of his alcohol and drug addiction, and it's very clear on the page. Things like that, things of scared of being a poor father, things like that, repeating a lot of the mistakes of your own parents. So I think it's a lot deeper of a book than some people think it is. But it was also the introduction of Sheriff Pangborn, who is one of my favorite characters, who we would see again in Needful Things, and I think Bag of Bones, I think he's in that one. So a very popular character among King fans. But while it's not one of my favorite books, I do think it gets a little more crap than it probably should from King fans. So I'm going to put it right around here. I think it's a little better than Firestarter, but I wouldn't quite put it past Carrie at this point. And that is kind of where we stand for right now, guys. So I'm doing these live, guys. I don't pre-plan this. I don't know where I'm going to put some of these sometimes. So some of these, I look at and I say, can they change? Maybe. But for now, I think this is where I would lock them in. As you can see, this was the hot streak of his career where I've got everything that You've Got to Shine or above, except, 5 books so far. So again, I really do, like I said, think he was untouchable during this stretch. But the 90s, like I said, would be the second arc of his career, and it's where I think things started to change just a little bit, for the better or for the worse. Well, we will talk about that, guys, when we get into part 3 next. I haven't decided what years I'm going to do next, but I don't think I'll be getting through the entire 90s in that stretch. I don't know. There's a lot of books. I think when you think about it, the guy was still putting out like a book a year, even while he was undergoing, rehab and all these real life situations. So that's kind of where we stand for right now, guys. So as always, I hope you guys can appreciate this. I hope you guys don't kill me too much about putting Talisman, this low. I hope you guys don't kill me too much about putting Thinner this high. But, I think every King reader's experience is going to be quite a bit different. You have some things that you can relate to and some things you can't. That's what makes these books great. So as a character first guy, this is always where I'm going to kind of put a lot of the things like this. And, that's why I can give, the Tommyknockers some credit for some of the things that he did in that. And it's why I can detract from some things like, the Talisman, because Richard's just terrible. And I'm going to die on that hill, guys. So, guys, that was where I have them. If you want to drop in the comments, let me know where you'd put some of these. I, as always, would appreciate that. And I will talk to you there.